serving as the lungs of the earth, absorbing vast amounts of carbon and emitting the very oxygen that allows our existence on this planet. There is truly no understating the importance of forests to human life. Yet, based on the way we treat these natural resources, one would never know it. 7% of wood is sourced from illegal logging globally, and 40% sourced from natural forests. Astonishingly, up to 30% of all industrial wood is consumed for just the production of shipping pallets and crates. Now, this is a serious issue, as it is predicted that if we continue our current rate of deforestation, the Earth will be completely barren of trees in just over 300 years. Hello, I am your host, Mike Lake, and today we will learn how detrimental the current pallet industry is to the environment. In today's preview, I am speaking with Matthew Reale, CEO of Ponera, a company that has reinvented the shipping pallet to be far more environmentally friendly and cost-effective, while simultaneously increasing the efficiency of shipping.
Innovation, resiliency, discovery. Join Mike Lake, President and CEO of Leading Cities, as we explore the technologies shaping the possibilities of our future with a preview of tomorrow.
Hello and welcome, Matthew. Thank you so much for joining us. And once again, I do want to welcome all of our listeners. I'd like to introduce you all to Matthew Reale, the CEO of Ponera, a company that has invented a smart, modular, reusable, and digitally enabled industrial packaging solution, which replaces one-time use crates and pallets. Now, we've all seen those wooden pallets all over the place. This is a much more modern version of that, which we'll get into in just a moment. But for now, Matthew, tell us, how did you first come to be interested in this shipping industry, and specifically pallets and containers?
So thank you very much for having me, Michael. So I grew up in a pretty international environment between the U.S., Switzerland, Italy, really moving around a lot growing up, and I was moving a lot due to my parents' industry, which is actually the freight forwarding industry. So I was kind of always acquainted to this industry. Then when I turned 18, went to study mechanical engineering at the EPFL in Lausanne, graduated in 2014. Since then, worked in the financial industry and in global operations strategy for a leading Swiss manufacturing company, where I was very much involved also with the outbound optimization processes. And that's really where also we found this big problem statement of the huge complexity which we have today in freight logistics and in packaging specifically, which creates the current situation where we have so many wooden pallets and crates which are built custom sized, meaning that they're very expensive, but also due to their customization are very often used once before being disposed. And that's where about 2.5 years ago with my co-founder Masoud, we said we need to find a solution to this problem, and we began the Ponera journey.
Well, I'll be honest, I think for a lot of our listeners, we probably don't think much about those pallets and take for granted the amount of wood, for instance, alone that is used to create them. But when you think about it, especially, through and post-pandemic, seeing the astronomical increase in price of wood, that has made everything from, I'm sure, building these pallets, but also home repairs much more expensive. The reality is this does, in fact, impact all of us. And I was shocked, I have to admit, to learn that 30% of all industrial wood is consumed in the production of pallets and crates. I mean, it's an incredible amount of wood we're talking about here.
It's yes, it's incredible. And actually, I have to be honest as well. Before doing all the deep research, I also would never have said that 30% of the industrial wood consumption is going for pallets and crates. But just to put that in numbers, it all makes sense when you think that in just the European Union, it's estimated that every year there's about 400 million square meters of pallets which are being produced. In the US, there's about 2 billion pallets which are in circulation at the moment. And in many industries, such as equipment manufacturing, it's estimated that anywhere between 15 and 20% of the weight of the goods which is being transported for these heavy metallic goods, which are coming with these heavy wooden boxes, is actually the wood. So not the good which is being purchased itself, but the package which is around it, and is only there really to get the goods from A to B safely and on time.
Well, speaking of getting goods from A to B on time, when you're talking about shipping, I mean, we're looking at the shipping industry alone having, in terms of total carbon emission impact, we're looking like 2 to 3% of the world's carbon emission just from shipping. And something like, I think it's 40% of global trade happens through shipping. You know, I mean, this is a staggering part of the global economy and a huge impact in not only our carbon emissions, but of course the climate challenges that creates. So give me a sense from your perspective, and I mean, I realize we're not just talking about shipping in the broad sense, but we're focusing in here on how we ship.
Yeah.
But what is that problem really like?
Yeah, so you mentioned it correctly. It's really a problem on a global scale, and it may not be getting the attention it deserves. If you consider shipping, so not only sea freight shipping, but also air freight, rail, trucking, it's estimated that up to 7% of the full CO2 emissions footprint is due to freight logistics. As you mentioned, 2 to 3% in sea freight shipping, and another 18% of the full CO2 emissions footprint is coming from manufacturing. And that's one part also that we often forget, is that to transport these goods, we also have to manufacture these boxes, so these packages, and that's actually a substantial portion of the total manufacturing emissions. So we're really tackling these huge problem statements, which together account for about 1/4 of the total CO2 emissions globally. And the reason why it's such a predominant source of emissions comes from a few different root causes. So on the one hand, we have this complexity and non-standardization in the packaging material, which really favors linear business models rather than circular business models. And that's where we're coming in with our product to really make this into a circular economy. But then there's also the whole topic of transparency. So it's very difficult to have a transparent freight logistics cycle, at least on a package level, when you're using packages once or very few times before throwing them away. So with our product, not only are we creating the circularity, so the reusability of the packaging material, so really decreasing by orders of magnitude the CO2 footprint from a packaging production perspective, but we're also hugely influencing then the whole freight logistics cycle through the transparency that we can guarantee through our modular system.
So I want to focus more on the solution. Walk us through, like, what exactly is this? How does it work? And then we can get into a little bit more on the impact side.
Sure. So we really developed this concept from familiar green field mentality. We really asked ourselves, okay, we know what the problem is today in the market, but what would be the ideal product to really make the system as sustainable, but also as efficient as possible. And that's where we knew that to create both an intelligent and efficient solution, we needed to have a transversal product which could really not only create a circular economy, but an effective circular economy. And that's how we came to the novel concept of full modularity, where we have modules of different sizes, which can all be interconnected to each other in 4 different directions and make any surface area which is required by the user at any given time. So the assembly and disassembly is very easy. Some call us the Lego of pallets. So very quick assembly and disassembly, and nowhere where we can go wrong. The product itself was designed to be efficient during transport itself as well. So not only the packaging and the assembly, so we actually reduce packaging weight by up to 60% versus the current solutions which are on the market. And we use so bio friendly and environmentally friendly polymers, which can all be 100% recycled, so recyclable. And we then, thanks to this circularity, which is created through the transversal characteristics of the product, now we can finally effectively digitize these logistics flows. So by linking our physical hardware solution to connectivity devices, and then thanks to this transparency, increasing the efficiency throughout the full freight logistics flows. To put that into perspective, it's another big problem statement. It's estimated that anywhere between 40 and 50% of all trucks which are transporting goods around Europe are empty. And actually, this is a particular problem to cities because if we look at all the short transports, e-commerce type transports, the usage rates of these small trucks or vans is very, very low. And one of the main reasons for that is the lack of transparency of where goods are at any given time.
So I'd like to focus a little bit more on that city impact. And not just the impact to the city, but also to the consumer, the buyer. You're talking about creating a more efficient system, which not only having a better sense of where my shipment might be, but also, correct me if I'm wrong, this is a guess on my part here, but would it also potentially result in me getting it faster?
Yes, that's correct. I think here the trick is really to serve the final client and customer to the requirement they need. It's true. In some cases, some goods aren't moving fast enough, and they're through the transparency, we can deliver a better service to the client and get the goods there faster. There's also the opposite case, right? There's also goods which are in line and they're shipped and arrive too early, so essentially are eating up the efficiencies of the goods which would then be transported at a later stage, and creating an inefficiency in the whole network, and also in these cases unneeded and unwanted carbon emissions.
So just to summarize this a little bit, if I'm understanding all of this correctly, we're talking about better serving the customer, the buyer in this case, of a Amazon, let's say, order. You're reducing the cost of shipping, both in terms of material, in terms of logistics costs, and in terms of just the fueling and space and all of that part of logistics. But you're also reducing the environmental impact and the CO2 emissions. You're speeding the process up. Matthew, tell me, why would a shipping company not be doing this?
Well, let's say the answer I have in my mind is there wasn't a product on the market until today which could resolve these issues, and that's where we saw the gap, and where we are trying to fill the gap. It's exactly as you say. There are multiple value propositions. So on the whole transparency topic, where the customer can follow his goods as they're being transported, can have also full transparency of the life cycle of the freight logistics, with any quality issues which can also arise during the transport itself. There's the huge cost impact, of course. So going from a linear to a circular model there, in a few usages, actually the customers already have a payback. So it's really, in some cases, we talk about order of magnitude cost reductions. The environmental impact with both on the raw material waste on the one side, so with all this wood which is either being incinerated or being disposed, but also from a CO2 perspective, due to the fact that the whole production cycle also takes up a lot of energy, and the transport itself of these heavy goods. But finally, we also have a fourth value proposition, which is really we make things more simple. So, of course, going from a linear model to a circular model requires change. So it changes the processes. One of the bigger changes is that there are multiple stakeholders through the value chain, which will be touching the product. But essentially, let's say at the end of the implementation, when we have this circular solution in place in a given operation, it increases the flexibility that that the user has. So just imagine today, a user really has to synchronize their goods dispatch with the production of new packaging material, which has to come in to their packaging areas or into their operations. That whole parallel value streams, which have to be, or value chains which have to be synchronized, falls out. Essentially, the users have a handful of different modules which can be interconnected very easily at any time, whether their products are late, whether they're early, whether they have unexpected volumes. They have full flexibility to really meet their clients' requirements.
Well, this is fascinating to me. And as I started by saying, I think this is an area that so many of us have never put any thought into. But the efficiencies and the cost reductions and the speed increases and the environmental impact. I mean, this is truly a remarkable solution, and couldn't come fast enough, frankly.
Thank you.
So my last question to you is, I want to think out 5, 10, 50 years down the road. Let's assume that there is no more wood being used for shipping pallets and crates. Instead, it's using your modular system. what do you see? How does that really impact the world in a grand scheme?
I think I think it would have a huge impact on many levels. So if we look at it from a sustainability perspective, not only from an environmental side, where obviously we'd be reducing the carbon emissions and the wood waste, but we would also really be building that intelligence inside packaging, inside freight logistics, which also has a social impact, right? Especially if we look at the people who are involved in those industries, really giving the packaging part of operations and of the value chains a much more key role in the whole value chain. And finally, from an economic perspective, of course, through that acquired efficiency, companies are become more competitive, which is a key driver of growth. So where we see it in 10, 20, 50 years is really in a solution which is globally rolled out, with multiple hub systems, where we're not only talking about a circular economy, but also a sharing economy. So giving, again, 1 degree more flexibility to the final users, also the smaller users like you and me. If, for example, when we are changing homes and we're transporting our smaller goods, and maybe we don't need packaging over the whole year, and giving access also to those people to something reusable, where they're not creating additional waste. And through the intelligence coming from the packages, so all that data, it said that the logistics is the intelligence of supply chains. And that is, so the logistics part of supply chains is where a lot of the complexities lie, but also where a lot of the efficiencies can come out. So I'm sure that through this added transparency, there are really hundreds of ways that then we can also optimize additional aspects of the supply chains, which are either linked or not even completely linked to the freight logistics flows directly.
Well, these conversations always go way too fast. I'm sorry we were out of time, but I'm so grateful for the work you're doing and paying attention to this area that has such a global impact as you've just described. So for any of our listeners or viewers, if they want to learn more, what's the best way to either get in contact or to learn more about Ponera?
Thank you. Yes, reach out anytime. So our internet site is www.poneragroup.com. We have an email address, contact@poneragroup.com, or you can reach out to myself also directly at matthew.reali@ponera.com.
Well, Matthew, thank you so much for joining us on Preview of Tomorrow. We look forward to your continued success.
Thank you. No, thank you very much, Michael. Always great to speak to you, and thank you for what you're doing with leading cities.
Thank you. Well done. And thank you for tuning in to this episode of Preview of Tomorrow. Listeners like you are essential to advancing our efforts to drive resiliency and sustainability for all. I ask that you give us a rating on Apple Podcasts or whichever streaming platform you prefer. Your feedback helps us to grow and share these brief previews of what life in the future can be. In addition to thanking our guest today, I want to thank Peter Roy and Demetria Bridges for making this podcast possible. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and encourage others to also join us each week in previewing the possibilities of tomorrow.
Preview of Tomorrow is brought to you by Leading Cities, a global nonprofit driving resilience and sustainability for all by unleashing the potential of the world's cities. Join them at leadingcities.org.